May we purify an ocean of worlds. May we free an ocean of beings. May we see an ocean of dharma. May we realize an ocean of wisdom. May we purify an ocean of activities. May we fulfill an ocean of aspirations. May we make offerings to an ocean of Buddhas. May we practice without discouragement for an ocean of eons. Good afternoon. Hope that your morning has been quiet and spacious, settling, clarifying. We are in the second half of our Buddhist Enlightenment Zazenkai. Zazenkai means to come together to practice meditation. And I mentioned earlier in the week that every year, Buddhist sanghas around the world come together to celebrate Buddhist enlightenment. It is said to have taken place on December 8th, and traditionally Zen communities do Rohatsu, the most intensive, the final sesshin of the year, from December 1st to December 8th, really to celebrate this auspicious date and to do as the Buddha did when he took the bodhi seat, the seat of enlightenment, and vowed to not get up until he'd seen what he had been working for a number of years, 6 years, the sutra said, to see. So today we too are sitting together. We're sitting facing ourselves, our minds, and meeting, I hope renewing our aspiration to wake up to who we are so we can be of benefit. So we can be of benefit to the world. So we can live deeply, joyfully as it is possible to live within what is by definition a rather challenging life. But we are up to that challenge. Bodhisattva warriors that we are, enlightenment beings, which is what a bodhisattva is. And so today I wanted to speak about Shikantaza, open awareness, objectless meditation. Because I speak a fair amount about koan study, and sometimes I feel I give Shikantaza short shrift. For no other reason, really, than it is difficult to talk about, right? Given its nature. How do you talk about not doing, not trying, not meditating, not concentrating? But given that several of us have Shikantaza as our practice, and given how important it is in the development of our own minds, I thought I would say a few words, buoyed, I hope, guided, I hope, by the power of the Buddha's own enlightenment on this, the anniversary of a most fortuitous event. So Shikantaza, just sitting, nothing but sitting, or focusing on just sitting, as some translations say. There's a Tibetan teacher, contemporary Tibetan teacher, Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche. He says that sitting in open awareness is like trying to see light in empty space. In one sense, it can't be done. It's non-conceptual. But then when you look at light, you see that it has two characteristics. One, it is other illuminating. The light that is coming right now through the window is illuminating my small case right here, and I can see it, you can see it. Light is also self-illuminating, right? So the light of the candle that I have on my altar does not need another light to be seen. The candle itself, the flame itself, is the light. And so this is a very interesting characteristic of light, that it can illuminate itself. It is luminous in itself, just like the mind. The mind sees all kinds of objects, like planes and trees and skunks. And it can also see intangible objects. It can see thoughts. It can see dreams. It can, in a way, see ideas. And not only can it see, it can also hear and smell and touch and taste. So mind illuminates the sensory world and sensory objects so that we can perceive them. Well, I don't know that it's causal like that. Light illuminates objects. Therefore, we can see them. I don't know that it's light's intention that we see them, but the result is that we can see them. But that's not all. The mind can also see itself, can perceive itself, which I think is absolutely amazing. It does require a different kind of seeing, and therefore a different kind of learning to see in this way, which is Shikantaza. I mean, meditation at its most basic, you could say, but it's Shikantaza. And that's why I love the image that a fellow teacher used at one point, which is that if you go to the movies, what would it be like if you could, instead of focusing on the story that is taking place on screen, you focused on the screen itself? That is what sitting in open awareness is like. You're not focusing on the stream of thoughts, on the content of the thoughts themselves, but you are aware of the stream flowing. And you're aware of awareness, and I hope at a certain point of the one who is aware. And so it is a little bit like using your peripheral vision to see in the dark, right? If you've ever tried to walk when it's pitch black, you have to not look directly at where you're going, but just a little bit to the side. That's where we have the rod cells that can see in low light. And so if you try to see, you can't. You have to relax and not try. Shikantaza. Just sitting, without doing, without effort, without concentration, without mindfulness, without letting go, without coming back. Just awareness itself, exactly as it is in the moment that it is. And so it would seem to be a very simple kind of meditation. And yet very difficult to do. Why? Because we're so used to striving. We're so used to working hard and feeling good about it, getting rewarded. You know, we like ourselves when we work hard. At least some of us do. I'm working hard, I'm quieting my mind, I'm spending hours doing Zazen. I don't miss a day, I have heard people say. I haven't missed a day for years. Not my case, by the way. No, okay. I mean, that's nice, and it could be powerful, but it's not the point. Sitting for many hours and trying very hard is not the point. The point in Shikantaza is to see that there is no point, and therefore no striving. Is to see that the mind, your mind, is already perfect, exactly as it is. It's already perfectly self-illuminating and other-illuminating. It doesn't need your involvement to do that. You don't have to mess with it. It just does it. Just as the body doesn't need permission, your permission to breathe. It knows perfectly well how to do it. It doesn't need your involvement. I think it was Khandro Rinpoche, who said something along the lines of, can you live with the fact that others don't need you to live well? What she meant was that others don't need our goodness, our hard work of doing meditation and practicing the precepts and cultivating wisdom. They're fine as they are, just as we're fine as we are. And can we really hear that? Can we let that in, really let that in? Because if we can, then we're doing Shikantaza. Then we're beginning to learn how to not do, not strive. And so Shikantaza has nothing to do with crossing our legs, closing our eyes, or lowering our eyes. It doesn't really have anything to do with sitting on your mat, looking over a pristine Zen garden, beautifully raked into concentric circles. The image that we have, or that many people have, they hear Zen meditation. That's the picture. It does have everything to do with a mind that could be in that moment, in that day, messy, harried, distracted, flitting from thought to thought, from thing to thing. You see? There really is nothing we need to do. Nothing. But if that's the case, why is Shikantaza an advanced practice? Because most of us don't know how to not do. How to let our minds alone. It's very hard for us to really trust, to really believe that we don't have to mess with things, that we don't have to make them better, brighter, more beautiful, more presentable, more acceptable. It's hard for us to believe that this moment, which doesn't feel like enough, it really is. We don't have to make more of it. I mean, how many moments have you had where your feeling, your perception was exactly the opposite of that? This is not enough. This is not okay. This is not the moment I want. It's hard to give up that inclination to improve. But it doesn't really, our effort, our to doing does not improve this nowness. In a sense, it only makes it more cluttered, and it stamps it with more of me. And that's burdensome. The reason I call Shikantaza the practice of ultimate trust is because it does require that we have faith in the fact that we really are enough in this moment, that this moment is enough, that others are enough, which means we can just let them be. What a relief. When we finally see that, we can set down the huge boulder that we've been carrying. We realize we are carrying it. We get tired of doing so, lugging all that weight around, and we put it down. So that we can do the work that this moment is presenting us with. Because it doesn't mean there's nothing to do. And that's one of the, perhaps the biggest paradox. Certainly the way that we frame the path in Buddhism. There's nothing to do, and there's lots to do. And as my teacher used to say, and both of those coexist simultaneously. And so some of that effort is discerning what kind of doing is needed here. Which of course leads us right into how do you do Shikantaza? How do you do this not doing? Well, like all other forms of Buddhist meditation, Shikantaza too relies on shamatha vipassana, stopping and seeing, calming and seeing, calm and insight. The mind has to be quiet enough for us to see what's going on in it. But you can't calm the mind by forcing it to be calm. Really, what is happening is you're removing the obstacles to that inherent calm. And so, we take up, the usual analogy of water. If the mind is like water, it's like a river, let's say. In the beginning, we notice that it's like a brook that is rushing down a very steep hill. The water just flows and flows without pause, and it's going too fast for us to even see the thoughts. And this is when people say, I can't sit, it's too hard. My mind won't be still. And they can't even pick out the thoughts that are throwing them, this way and that. But the very interesting thing about this brook, this body of water, is that if you start to pay attention to it, if you start to really look at it very intently, but very calmly, it loses steam. It needs that rush, that distraction to keep its momentum. And so when you begin to turn toward it, you begin to put your mind on it, your awareness on it, it begins to slow down. Then the mind becomes like a turbulent river. It's full of rocks, which makes the water choppy, but now it's a little bit more broken up. You can see the rocks. You can see the water, smashing against them. You can start to see your thoughts, and you can even see yourself thinking them here and there. Here and there, you catch yourself in the process of thinking, in that process of that water rushing downstream. And believe it or not, that's a step toward calm, even though it doesn't feel that way. But in that becoming aware, awaring, as Tony Packer used to say, it's no longer just happening to you. Right? Now you can start to pick out the various pieces. Oh, there's water. Oh, there's rocks. Oh, there's lots of waves. And there's the one who's watching. I don't know if there are other animals that have the capacity for that self-awareness. I mean, they think that maybe elephants, that they can recognize themselves in the mirror. Maybe octopuses. I mean, they definitely recognize people. But this capacity to turn our attention around, to notice the one who's noticing, how incredible. And so the more you do that, the more the water slows down. It's like now you're sitting there and you're watching the movie, but you've been looking at the screen. And so now you can pick out the pixels that are making the image. Now you can see the gradients of shadow and light. And the water is slowing down even more. So now, in the third iteration, if you will, the water is now flowing slowly. Now, before it smashes into the rocks, it just kind of flows around it. You don't get smushed in between your own, in the clatter of your own noise. And there begins to be a sense of ease, of smoothness in that process of thinking. It doesn't feel so conflicted. Now you start to feel like you are actually navigating those waters, and you can see the rock coming and you can avoid it. And that comes with that sense of ease and confidence, because that builds a very interesting kind of power that you start to see, oh, I don't have to just be thrown about by my thoughts, by my own mind. I don't have to be a victim of my own moods, for example, of my own ups and downs. It's not that you can control them necessarily, but you're in a different relationship with them. And some of that energy that you had tied up into protecting and just navigating, just surviving, really, now is freed up. This is an interesting moment in practice, because people then start to become interested in new things. Maybe they take up a form of art, or they start to learn a new language, or they, start going out more, I don't know, hiking, or, because they have more of themselves available to themselves. It's really beautiful to watch when you have the privilege to do that. You start to see they're putting that weight, that burden down. And if that river continues in that vein, it just opens up. It flows into the ocean that is without waves. It's very calm. And so the water flows in and it just gets absorbed into all that space. That is a moment of samadhi, meditative absorption, one-pointedness. One-pointedness when you're using a single object. In the case of Shikantaza, it is actually in that gets absorbed in that openness. There is no one, there's no many, there's just that whole, period. And when you get to this point, you might feel joy. You might be flooded, in fact, with a feeling of joy, with bliss even. I touched on this a few weeks ago. It feels spacious inside. It feels quiet. But if you're working with someone, or if you just know enough to not stay there, you just keep watching. And you just keep moving through that ocean. The ocean does begin to realize it is ocean, not just wave. The mind, watching mind, begins to realize it is luminous. It has, like the candle, that inner luminosity. And it starts to see things in a different light because it doesn't see them just out there. And it begins to see itself in a different light, not as a thing, but as light itself. And at this point, thoughts stop, even briefly. This is the state of non-thinking, which you got to by not thinking, as Yaoshan said. You know that famous koan. A monk comes along as Yaoshan is sitting, says, "What are you doing there, sitting so quietly?" And Yaoshan, humoring him, says, "I think not thinking." How do you think? Not thinking. Yaoshan says, non-thinking. This is Shikantaza in a nutshell. Recently, I was reading an article in the New Yorker. It was very interesting, by a philosopher. Her name is Lori Paul, or L.A. Paul. And she became known some years back for making the argument that when you're anticipating making a transformative decision, having a child was her main example, because at the time she was considering whether to get pregnant. There are two selves that are yourself, the one before and the one after, right? So and in the case of, let's say, a woman specifically, because she would be the one bearing the child, the woman who has not yet had the child and is considering whether to become pregnant is not the same and can never be brought together, she claimed, as with the parent. Why? Because no matter how much you imagine, no matter how many of your friends who have become parents tell you how wonderful, how amazing it is, they give you stories, they give you all the reasons, they try to show you what it is like to be a parent, you can't possibly know that. And the parent can't possibly know anymore what it was to be before that transformative experience. I mean, they remember, yes, but that is not the same self. She actually, I think, to make her point a little more, I think, so that people would listen to her, because she was teaching in college at the time. The example that she gave was, if you were considering whether to become a vampire, if you could do it painlessly and without hurting anybody, and all your friends have gone ahead and become vampires, and they tell you how incredibly amazing it is, all these powers that you have, you look amazing because you always look young, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And she said, and she made the argument that you could never really, the pre-vampire could never really know what it would be like to be a vampire. And the vampire is now completely immersed in that view. So everything that they say is colored by that view. And so that the two can't really come together. Plenty of people have debated whether this is true. But what I thought interesting was this idea, this concept of these two selves, more than two usually. I think I agree with the fact that there's many, many selves operating in each of us at any given moment, really. But that there's the one before and the one after. She said, for many big life choices, we only learn what we need to know after we've done it. And we change ourselves in the process of doing it. Oh, and so her argument was that not only that these two couldn't meet in a way, but that you couldn't make that decision rationally. You couldn't solve the problem, quote unquote, rationally. And the reason it interested me is because I thought this is exactly like practice, right? In a moment before insight, you can't possibly know what that will be like. You hear me say these things. I give talks, at least twice a month. We meet every week. I say things, I say lots of things, and I try to say it different ways, point to different ways so that you'll hear me. Still, you can't possibly know what I'm talking about until you take that step and you see it. The person before seeing the cypress tree and after seeing the cypress tree, not the same person. The person before fully being with the breath and after being with the breath. So the person who's distracted, if you will, and the person who will, for an instant even, become immersed in breath, like completely opposite sides of the planet. So what does this mean? It means you don't have to waste any time wondering what seeing Mu or the cypress tree or being with your breath or letting go of the self, seeing our minds becoming enlightened will be like. You do not have to worry about it one bit, because no matter what you imagine, it can't possibly be that. That can't possibly be your experience. There's absolutely nothing I could say, any teacher could say, any sutra could say, that will paint an accurate picture of what that experience of insight will be like for you. Therefore, all you can do is let go and practice. All you can do is trust. Trust also that the person that you'll become, right, the person on the other side of that insight will be someone with whom you'd like to hang out. that person will be fine. In the end, Paul says, the best response to this situation is to choose based on whether we want to discover who will become. Aspiration. That's the best response. Vow. That's the best response. If we want to discover who we will be in the next moment and the next and the next, then we have to not know. Not just who we'll become, actually, but who we are now. We have to completely, thoroughly, from tip of your hair to tip of your toe, not think about it, not know. And to trust even a little bit that non-thinking mind, because if you trust it a little bit, that's your foot in the door. Then it's just a matter of time. Trust that on the other side of that unknowable moment, there is something huge and invaluable. Because I promise you that it is, there is. But don't take my word for it. Never take my word for it. Don't just see it for yourself.